Emmett, welcome to Validated.
Thanks for having me, dude. Good to see you.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Solana Mobile today.
Perfect.
The only successful crypto hardware company that isn't a hardware wallet
So far.
so far.
Yes. Well, I appreciate
Meaning it's not a hardware wallet yet, or no one else is successful yet?
Interpret that as you will. Does it mean we're not successful? Does it mean we're not the only one? Any of it. But yes, we've definitely spent a lot of time thinking about hardware in the last few years, probably more so than most teams in crypto, unless you're a hardware wallet, basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair.
So to give the folks a little inside baseball just on where we stand on this, I was at Solana Foundation back when the first Solana Mobile project came out. Was kind of slightly involved in it, I'd say. Obviously not as much as you and the rest of the team, but was in and around that idea through the ideation stage and the first product launch. Things have changed a lot since those early days of trying to build like a high-end flagship Android-powered Solana mobile phone with basically the team that originally built the Essential phone. So like, I guess let's start off with this. Kind of like give me an overview of like where things stand today in terms of like the products and the way that you're thinking about Solana Mobile. What are we, 3.5 years in?
Ish. Yeah. Today we're very much focused on Seeker, which is the phone we launched last year. You referenced Saga, which is the first generation device. We learned a lot from that one. You were around in the very early days, so you can attest to us having maybe no idea what we were doing at times. But we learned a lot of good lessons. We got a lot of good bumps and bruises. And now we're at a point where, Saga, when it first came out, sold 5,000, 6,000 devices. Later that year, it sold out another 15,000. So we ended up on 20,000. That was a lot of luck, but we were in the right place, right time.
Yeah, thanks, Bonk.
Thank you, Bonk. And then we had the opportunity to launch another device and really try to make right some of the things that maybe we misstepped on, but also learn more, frankly. Because like as much as the first device was a proof of concept, it really is something you want to learn from. And we got something, but we didn't get quite enough. And Seeker is very much a successor insofar as what can we learn? Where is there an opportunity to find product market fit when you rethink what it means for crypto and a hardware device to live together? The shift from this is just an app that sits on top of an OS, but it does crypto stuff to, okay, what does it mean to go one level deeper? What does it mean to have a platform in the device? And so we're increasingly thinking of ourselves as platform and tech stack.
Yeah.
Even though Seeker is our most successful product to date, and it's what we've learned the most from, as we look forward, it's more about how do we take this platform and set of technologies and create more entry points beyond just what we ourselves have brought to date so far.
Yeah, I want to kind of hang on this here a bit because I think this is pretty important. So the original Saga phone, like the question was always like, why do you need a dedicated device? And the answer at the time was like, well, seed phrases. Like there's a lot of things like the problem with self-custody and the beauty of self-custody is you can rug yourself and someone can rug you. And so, the drumbeat is always like, don't keep any serious amount of funds on a software only wallet, on a hot wallet, a browser extension, like buy a Ledger, buy a Trezor, buy some type of hardware wallet for stuff that is more money than you'd want to walk around with just in your good old fashioned leather wallet. And so that was kind of like the original pitch of this is like, there's a secure element in it. There's the seed vault. There's this like, we're using a bunch of phone technology that's historically been used to secure face prints and fingerprints and credit cards. And now it's securing your private keys. What did you guys kind of learn with the process of Saga that like worked, that didn't work? Like, was that enough of a pitch for folks? Like, walk me through a little bit of like, when there was a decision made, okay, we should do a second phone, like what were the things that like, we definitely want to do that again and we definitely don't want to do that again?
Yeah, I'll start with the hardware. So as you know, with Saga, we stepped into a relationship with a team who already had a vision of a hardware product, of a phone. and what that meant to them. And what that meant to them made total sense for the principles and the way they thought about products. What we ultimately found was it was a little bit big, it was a little bit heavy. And so for a lot of users who think of what we've built as maybe a secondary device or maybe their primary device, but either way, there has to be this kind of like portability, for lack of a better phrase. Every mobile phone should be portable, but something that feels really easy to carry. We needed to get that right, which we didn't quite with Saga. So that was one thing we knew we wanted to change.
Yeah, Saga felt, I wouldn't even say it felt like luxury. It felt much more like jewelry than technology.
I think that's a good framing of it. It was like,
it was like too nice.
Yeah, it was like when this is maybe a bad comp, but like when credit cards went from plastic to metal, we were like, this is nice. It doesn't solve any new problems, but like it's really nice. It's like cool. I think in a similar way, a lot of the sort of fit and finish decisions we made with Saga was like cool and interesting and like stuff you don't see on every device, but it didn't always solve a problem for people, and actually maybe wasn't even the thing that they needed. So maybe the credit card comp's not perfect, but I think that's kind of similar. You hold a plastic card and then you hold a metal card and you're like, wow, these feel very different. Got the same sensation the first time I held a Saga. So that was something we just knew we needed to redo. And honestly, when you make those decisions for a phone to feel more like jewelry, it's going to get very expensive very quickly. And we wanted to broaden the reach of what we were building, and you can't do that at $1,000. Even I would argue at $500, which is what we sold Seeker for, that's still too much for a lot of the world who both care about crypto and digital assets and are willing to use an Android device. We still need to shoot lower than that, but I think the step from starting at 1,000 to starting at 500 was enough to justify maybe using a polymer in the side rails as opposed to a metal, right? Like some of those subtle changes that you notice when you hold it compared to another phone, but when you hold the same phone day after day, you forget.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I expected it to feel like a cheap Android phone when I was unboxing it. And I prefer the design of Seeker to Saga.
Thank you.
Even just personally, even though like it is objectively a less premium feeling product, there's something about it that actually feels a lot better, which I was surprised by.
I appreciate hearing that. Knowing you would have loved to be in the room as we were going through the ID process of it. It was probably the most fun I've had in my career, to be totally honest.
Nice.
But to that point, there's a lot of subtle decisions that you make throughout this process that like ultimately add up to more than the sum of their parts. For people who have ever used not an iPhone at any point, there's like a huge spectrum of, especially when you go 5 to 10 years back, of these like very feature rich, very premium phones, and you hold them and something just doesn't feel quite right. And then you had Google launch its first Pixel, which was like a relatively modest phone, but it felt really nice. Or even Motorola when it did the Moto X. Like there's just been a string of phones when you look back that are more than the sum of their parts. And I think we somehow got there with Seeker. It was very intentional. We really thought long and hard about making this feel reflective of the types of people who buy a phone to belong to a community of people who also bought the phone without beating you over the head with that fact. This shouldn't be like bad crypto swag from a conference, but it also shouldn't be this just like plain, nobody cares about how it looks kind of piece of technology. We had to find a middle ground there.
So you guys made a bunch of hardware changes, right? One of those was drop the cost by 50%. That was one of the goals. Like, what else was important to you about a V2 of this thing?
So on the hardware front, definitely make it cheaper. We also wanted to make it just smaller. Like I mentioned, it had to feel like something you could carry. We needed the cameras to be better. A bunch of the sort of baseline things we just needed to get really right. And we found the right set of partners to make that a reality. The truth is, there's only like a handful of companies who make consumer electronics products in the world who own everything from one end to the other. Everybody else relies on their friends. And there's like a broad spectrum of friends in the consumer hardware world. And we really landed on really solid group of partners. So making it lighter, making it brighter, all the cameras, all that stuff, just finding the right people to work with to really like blow the top off there. That was the kind of second set of priorities.
So like with Saga, that was a device, as you mentioned, that sort of was someone else's vision that you were adding a bunch of like crypto magic to. When you guys were going out to do Seeker, like you mentioned, there's this whole consortium of various companies you go and talk to. Like, is it literally like you fly to Shenzhen and you're like, oh, I want this camera module and this processor and this screen looks nice? Like, how do you actually like pick the stuff that goes into it?
Yeah, this is great. This is a really good question and you'll appreciate it. So for a company like ours, who is predominantly software people, predominantly crypto people and software people, right? We've got like marketing and we've got some people who build software and people who can talk to developers. All of the hardware stuff, you need to have one really good first partner. And for us, that is our OEM, a company called FX Tech. They got their start way back when their principal architect, their CTO, was building accessories for Motorola phones. There was like this Moto Mods thing. Motorola released
this company
a phone.
sounds really familiar.
Okay, so Motorola released a phone, and they were like, we want to open up a partnership program. Like it's a modular, you can build accessories to it. There's this like universal power and data adapter on the back. So like go nuts. And they opened this thing up and one company jumped in and was like built battery and camera and all sorts of stuff. And it was the early start of this company, FX Tech, who then went on to build a slide out keyboard phone. They were kind of like taking interesting shots, but they're all ex-HTC people. They're all ex-Samsung people. They sort of know who's who in Shenzhen and Taiwan.
They built the like the BlackBerry case for an iPhone, right?
Okay, yes. So they also are the team who works very closely with Clicks, who has done the BlackBerry-esque case for iPhone, the slide-out case, and coming soon as a communicator device, which is intended to kind of remove the addiction to phones by just doing a smaller screen and some physical buttons. Really cool product. But they know, like they had been around enough and built enough products to know kind of who was trustworthy and who was not. So when we got to start this from zero, we didn't say, we want this screen or we want this camera or we want this processor. We were able to speak in terms of requirements. Like our users need a brighter screen. Our users need a smaller screen. Our users need 3 cameras. And then they were able to bring back, okay, we checked our supply chain, so-and-so OEM built these panels last year. There's a couple 100,000 extra of them. So you can actually get a small display and not pay an arm and a leg. Because typically you perversely pay more for small screens because globally...
Because fewer people buy them.
Yeah, exactly. Because globally users have just adopted the 6.7-inch screen. So they were able to just basically shake branches and figure out at 150,000 units, you can qualify for a lot of discounts, but getting something custom made, custom fabbed is still pretty exorbitantly expensive. Just like the upfront NRE of that doesn't amortize quite as well. So it's like, where can you grab onto? And they just know who's doing what. And so they came back to us and said, here are the things we would suggest. Here are some options. Here are some like decision points. And so we sort of pieced that all together, picked our full bill of materials, and then we transitioned into ID. And basically the industrial design process was like, we're putting all these things in a box. How small can we make the box? What shape can we make the box? Where can we put the cameras on the box? And what color should it be? What should it look like? And that's, again, it was like having the right first partner meant that all the subsequent partners we worked with, it was just a lot more seamless this time around.
Nice. And you mentioned kind of like that is the $150,000 like, or 150,000 unit like break point. The first, run was obviously of Saga was only 20,000 units. Like, what were kind of the ambitions going into this? I know there was a pretty successful pre-order campaign. Was it 75,000 units?
So we ended up, the pre-order campaign itself was about 150,000. Now, converting those pre-orders into actual orders is kind of tricky math to go back and account for. But when we set it out, we sort of internally challenged it as a bit of a Kickstarter. We had seen the surge of the Saga sellout, and we said, okay, should we or should we not do a second product? We need to learn a little bit more about like where people did find value on this thing and what the usage is now that we've shipped out to all these bonk enthusiasts. But also we need to make sure that there's enough interest to necessitate doing a second. And so we opened up kind of a Kickstarter and had 100,000 pre-orders in about a month's time. And that was the internal threshold we had set. We had said if we can get to 100,000 units, we'll go. And so we did that, and then we continued to sell more. And we're still selling more. Maybe not at the rate we did in those early days, but like still selling them. So 100,000 was very much the number. Like totally said, if we can get to 100,000, let's go.
What is kind of like the ongoing process of that look like, right? Like if you're Apple, you just sort of pulse up and down your orders on a monthly basis based on demand and stuff like that. When you guys are looking at this, I'm sure there's like batching that goes on.
Yeah, we were very fortunate to have such a huge pre-order.
Yeah.
Basically, so that our first order could be quite big. Now, that pre-order was released in batches, you're right, but we had this weird conundrum, which is the crypto community has some high expectations of how they should be treated as users. And so had we said, okay, like, pre-order number 1, you're getting your phone now, pre-order number 150,000, you'll get yours in 6 to 8 weeks, I think it would have just created too much consternation and too much anxiety about, well, I missed out on so-and-so and why am I not being prioritized? So we ultimately made the decision to hang on to a lot of our inventory for a couple of weeks until we were basically at the point where we had enough inventory to satisfy all of our pre-orders. So one big upfront order. Now we do have sort of ongoing batches to account for the long tail and accommodate inventory going down. But we're at a point where I think we've got enough probably in the tank to sell out the remainder of Seekers and sort of move on to the next big challenge, continue to support Seeker. That's like our most important audience. But sort of set our sights upfield on what it means to work with new hardware partners in the future.
So I want to like talk a little bit more about the software side of this before we get into some of what the future of this looks like. At this point, there was all these kind of ambitions and goals initially around like we're going to create an alternative to the app stores and I think this is one of those like moments where it's just like, man, totally was prescient. Like he's totally like,
Always.
The EU stepped in, the Supreme Court stepped in and had to crack open these app stores in terms of like, now you have some ability sometimes sort of to like install other apps in other app stores. But there still is like the amount of like crypto or anti-crypto policies in many of these app stores are still pretty high. How is that sort of like software ecosystem community development side of things gone for Solana Mobile?
It's been really interesting over the last few years. We very much set out the gate with this like, screw the duopoly mentality. And that still is very around, both because they continue to screw companies over and teams over in crypto, but also just, I don't know, it's like the type of people attracted to this space are the type who sort of feel some of that, even if they, at the end of the day, go back to their iPhone and download apps from the Apple App Store and love it. Like they still kind of get it and want smaller companies to find paths to succeed. Mm-hmm. That was our initial pitch to developers, was like, screw those guys, come over here. What's actually just been the thing that's driven the most adoption and success on the developer side is having users, which is like, yeah, no duh. But we went from, I think when we launched Saga, we had about 25 apps in our store to about 50 by the time we sold out, to a little over 100 when we started shipping Seeker. And now we're a bit north of 800 apps in our store. So it's really taking off. And as we talk to developers, the thing that we just continue to hear are two things. One, the tooling required to build an app has never been more accessible. With the launch of Claude Code and various...
I literally built an app over the weekend.
Yeah, exactly, right? The barrier to entry has never been lower. So that's the first thing, is the actual cost to compete and participate is super low. The second is, we have a lot of users who are still active, right? Now, there might be a subset of them who are farming and just, kind of like the traditional crypto user who is a chaos monkey and plugging things in and unplugging them and tapping buttons. But there's also a lot of users who have actual funds stored on their phone, who are deploying them across DeFi, who are trying games. And so for a lot of the apps, they see that opportunity and they're like, you know what? If I'm going to find my first 1,000 users anywhere, going to this like very concentrated pool of people who are trying everything is a pretty good place to start. So that's been kind of the second tailwind we've had, in addition to just the tooling being easier than ever before.
Nice. So what is that like? There's like a real chicken and the egg problem of like, hey, deploy your, like 150,000 units is like a pretty good install base.
Yeah.
It's a lot lower than an iPhone or Android.
Totally.
And there is, of course, like special cool customizations. Like you don't just want the Jupyter app that you can download for iPhone on Seeker. You want them to take advantage of the things that you can actually do. So like, I guess like maybe walk me through, if you were talking to like a Solana crypto project that has done some type of app work, maybe it's Phantom or Soulflare or Jupyter, and you're saying like, there's actually more you can do on Seeker than you can do in an iPhone or a stock Android. What's that pitch look like? Like kind of walk me through what that value proposition is for them.
Yeah. For the bigger companies, I will admit, it's hard, right? If you are a crypto company who's got distribution, has found your way to distribution in app through Apple and Google, and have access to millions of users or already are downloaded by millions of users, it's a lot harder to make the case that you should be doing bespoke customizations to your app for our audience. With that said, there are still some messages that land. The first is we have fewer users, but they're insanely spendy. We have like just a shocking number of people who hold like a ton of funds in their seed vault. Like when we go to our full list of wallets who hold the Seeker Genesis token and sort by total assets, it's like a little bit alarming. And so for developers, it's like going to chase whales is worth it, right? There's like a reason. There's a reason Epic Games is pushing so hard for sideload, and it's not for the 12-year-old who spends $2 a month in Epic Games. It is for the person who spends a few $1,000s a year. They can convince and coach that person to sideload and make it worth their while by offering them incentives. And so for us, we have to take a very similar approach, which is we're not going to offer the widest distribution. So if you're a big company, the reason to customize for our audience is because they're going to spend more. So that's the first piece. For everybody else, if you're not a big app who's already figured out how to play the game with Apple and Google, it's, the first 1,000, 10,000 users is of value. And so treating our store as a launch pad is real. Like there are companies who didn't exist and then spun up for one of our hackathons, and now they have recurring revenue and they can continue to kind of exist. And so we have to tailor the pitch, but those are generally speaking how we hit it.
If I go to like Claude Code or something like that today, does it know how to code for the Seeker and Saga specific stuff?
Some of it, yes. Some of it requires a little bit of handholding. We're working a lot on this, but for most developers, like the one thing they should do is include our version of the wallet adapter called the mobile wallet adapter. All that does is it makes your connect and sign experience feel more like how Apple Pay works, which is the reason Apple Pay is successful is because you don't have to open an app to Apple Pay. It just works whether you're on a website or in an app. It sort of feels ubiquitous. Mobile wallet adapter offers the same type of cross-platform crypto connection and signing experience. And so for developers, if they can just get that right, they're already doing pretty well for us. And with Claude Code, you can point it towards the right set of docs and get the outcome you're looking for. There's still room to be, there's still work to be done there though.
Yep. That makes sense. So you guys launched a token.
We did.
Just gonna hard pivot right into this.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Why? Tell me more, right? Because I think there's on one hand, tokens are great. Everyone should launch a token, but this is not like a meme coin of, hey, like you like Seeker, here's a Seeker that you can trade, right?
Yeah.
There is at least some idea of like a bunch of utility around this thing, or ways it can be used in the future. Walk me through why launch a token when you have obviously a profitable hardware product as well.
The token for us is not about making money, which I think is an important distinction. There's a lot of teams that launching the token is like a way to capture some momentum and goodwill to get some type of capital back into your business to maybe invest in growth. The fortunate part of being incubated within labs is we don't have those same demands. And so I think that's like the first and foremost thing to put out there. Totally is not like collecting a bunch of SKR and selling it behind the scenes. Like we're doing just fine. But what it does enable us to do is to take some swings on trying to build a new type of organized community and ecosystem that not all products contend with. Because we think of ourselves a little bit more as a platform, insofar as we have users and we have developers, and we will seek new distribution paths through hardware partners. Coordinating all of that, especially when there's economic activity taking place between those parties, is pretty tough. Like we can set some policies, set some rules, but that's, enforcement can be a nightmare. The good news is the way we're building the tech is it runs from the very beginning. It's tied to the bootload of the phone. And so enforcement of policies can be programmatic. And so you can have on-chain contracts that say, here's what can and can't take place. Here's the devices that can and cannot join the network. And then there's a bunch of on-device enforcement of those policies. Having a token as a means for both incentivizing and punishing bad, like incentivizing good activity and punishing bad activity, was something we wanted to take a crack at. And launching a token gives us the opportunity to sort of set some of those rules, set some of those policies, and create new kind of value capture mechanisms in the future. Even if most of those aren't live today, it gives us an opportunity to take more shots at doing something that is actually different than what Apple and Google are doing, as opposed to just, it's the Google Play Store with crypto. Like that's not forever. We have to try something that's actually different. And the token is our means to start to experiment in that avenue.
Yeah. So you were talking before about how like what you primarily make is software. Mm-hmm. Like obviously the end product is a hardware software combo product, but most of what your team works on is the software side. What's the future of that look like? I know in the original vision for Solana Mobile, there was a hope that either, existing manufacturers would pick this up and integrate some of the technology, or that there may actually be something like Helium started out making the hotspots, and now they don't make the hotspots. They just certify other people's hardware to work on their system. Yeah, walk me through kind of like where that is now, how that pitch has been to some of these like potential partners on this, and yeah, what's coming?
This is where we're spending a lot of time thinking about what the future looks like, and we are very committed to a world where our stack, that set of technologies, is running on other smartphones. Like the truth is, the number of people in the world who care so much about crypto that they would buy a phone from a crypto company is like somewhat finite, I would argue. Like it's not the biggest audience in the world, but the broader audience of people who do care about self-custody and do care about assets is pretty big. They might not come to us to buy a phone, but like if they want to do things on their phone, whether that's trading activity or what have you, like that is a worthwhile audience to serve. And so if we, on the one hand, acknowledge it's a big audience, but on the other, they might not come to us for their next phone because buying a phone is a very personal decision, then we think tackling the existing distribution and hardware that's already out there is the best use of our time, especially because, like I said, we are software and crypto experts. And so we've been in the process of talking to Android phone manufacturers. The Android OEM market is under a ton of stress. Unless you're Samsung in the Android space or Google, you have basically zero R&D budget, very limited margins. It's really hard to generate recurring revenue once you've sold a device. You're effectively selling a commodity.
Yes.
And the input costs of those have just gone through the roof as RAM costs go up and everything. So They're looking for a means for differentiation. Almost all of them already have digital assets on their roadmap in some form or fashion, but they don't have the R&D budget to get it off the ground, and they don't have the expertise to execute. So it's like a perfect opportunity for us to step in and provide what they believe their customers need.
I want to hang on that for a second because, when Saga was announced, digital assets was not on the R&D list for any OEM, let alone kind of like a mid-market or low-market Android manufacturer. What's changed? What did they see? Like, why now do they actually seem to care about digital assets?
They care, well, so they were always interested, but when we kicked off Saga, there was still so much uncertainty. And not to say there's not uncertainty now, but there was so much uncertainty about what the future of the industry would look like. And obviously, 2023 was a little bit of a refresh on everybody's timelines. But in the last year or so, year and a half, things have really picked back up. I think a couple of inputs that have driven some of their interest. One is there's increasing institutional adoption. These guys know Visa, they know Western Union, they know these big companies who are adopting crypto. And so there's a little bit of like an acceptance factor, which is, okay, maybe it's not as scary as it once was. And the second thing is they actually know their customers quite well. And they know that their customers are downloading these apps from the app stores. They're downloading centralized exchanges. They're downloading self-custody wallets. And so at a certain point, like, you have to accept that this is what your users are doing. And you can either choose to let them go grab an app from the store and it sits on top of everything, or you could try to service it in a way that is more seamless, more secure, and take back a little bit of control. Or not necessarily control, but take back the experience and make it feel more native and more integrated. And so we're just increasingly seeing OEMs who are thinking about this.
I think it's interesting that digital assets are so high up on the roadmap for these guys because it feels like an area that's very hard to monetize. And as you mentioned, it's like a very brutal market out there. Is there motivation that they think they can develop sort of first-party digital asset services? Or is this just like, hey, there's 35,000 $200 Android phones. The reason I'm going to buy this one is because it has crypto features?
A little bit of A, a little bit of B. What we're hearing, those are effectively the two things we're hearing. I think for the third, those are the two things they hear. The third thing is, there's a third, which is Apple and Samsung are doing stuff and everybody is just going to start copying that. Samsung has had a wallet for a couple of years now.
Yep.
They continue to invest in Nux, which is their secure enclave platform. And Apple has filed a bunch of patents associated with digital assets. Now, I don't think everybody knows exactly what that will look like, but there's always this, we've got to keep up with the Joneses with Apple and Samsung. That's absolutely a motivator. But for these OEMs, they think there's a way to create a little bit of margin on devices by supporting some part of the crypto stack. And they're right. If we work with them and we can find ways to implement our technologies, there is a little bit of recurring revenue for them to capture. It might not sound like a lot to you or to me or to a software-only company, but these companies make low single-digit dollars on some phones. And so if you can give them recurring revenue of a couple bucks a year, they're doubling their return on a phone that they're selling. So it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference for these companies.
Yeah, I've always kind of said that it's like the place where the crypto value proposition is strongest is obviously places that have governments that you have to worry about, but then also businesses that just have razor thin margins.
Totally.
That's the classic thing of even if it's little things their weird third-party app store, because it accepts stable coins, they've saved 75 bips on payment processing. That is definitely material.
Totally. Yeah. And right now, a lot of the levers that they try to pull include just a bunch of pre-installed bloatware. Sometimes they're selling ads in the OS itself. They have to do some relatively user unfriendly things to try to squeeze a few extra pennies out of a phone. And I think they see crypto as a means to say okay, if there's going to be some users who are doing this stuff anyway, can we give them some set of tools where if there's a couple basis points here and there that we can participate in, it'll make the difference for us in the long run. And we're happy to help them explore that. I think we've built a lot of the technology that they would need to make that a reality. And if we basically set their costs of R&D to near zero, our stack gets broader adoption. There's a bigger audience of people who are participating. There's more developers, there are more users. That flywheel gets spinning, and we create a little bit of differentiation. It might not help them sell 100,000 phones more a year, but maybe for some consumers, it being listed as the third bullet on the feature set is enough to tip the scales.
Yeah.
It's continued. The conversations have continued with a lot of big hardware manufacturers.
So I guess that kind of leads to the business question, which is if you're dealing with folks who are running razor thin margins, like you're probably not able to enter into some lucrative licensing agreement for the Solana Mobile software. Plus, I think the majority of it's open source. The parts that can be, obviously the secure enclave part is all closed source. Thanks, Qualcomm.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you kind of think about this like long term, the reason Google was able to do Android for free is because they're an ad tech company and it helps support their ad tech platform. The reason Microsoft is able to make, Windows laptops is because they license you the OS, right? These sorts of, and that becomes like a additive relationship with other hardware manufacturers. How do you look at that over the long term? Should we expect that there is always sort of a flagship Solana Mobile hardware product, and then there's a lot of like other folks who just help grow the ecosystem, make the install base more attractive, all these types of things? Or is kind of your goal to eventually stop producing hardware?
Our goal would be to eventually stop producing hardware. Now, I say that, but if the community wants more devices, we can and will sell them. But we need to have pretty high confidence. We're not going to take the same bets. Companies who are in the hardware business are just going to keep shipping new phones every single year, no matter what. I don't see us in that business. If there is a unique need, if there's a unique opportunity, we will definitely sell new flagship devices. Maybe we do get experimental and we're doing new types of form factors or new types of devices that uniquely cater to what I would consider to be the more like pro audience within the space.
You're going to do a circular phone as your next product?
Yeah, Linux backpacks, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. Who knows? Who knows? I would say for the pro audience, if there's a unique need, we'll fill it. But otherwise, the way we think about our business is we're building this tech stack. If you are building the interface at which trading activity and crypto activity is happening, there are opportunities to capture some fees. And so whether those fees are coming, some are going to hardware manufacturers, whether a portion of those come back directly to us or go directly into hopefully some way back to the token holders, of which Solana Labs is a token holder of SKR. I think either of those paths we're sort of open to. But just building a business that can only exist by selling a certain number of hardware units in a year at a certain margin, it's just not realistic for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of interesting though, because like I have talked to a number of folks who, especially after some of the multi-sig compromises over the last year or two, they're like, oh, I would pay $20 a month for a like highly integrated Squads app on a Seeker or something like that. Because I think there is that kind of area where I kind of want to just buy a random Android phone for this, right? And then there's limits on what you can do with iPhone. So there's something very interesting there.
We have we have some people internally who use it as their multi-sig signer and their auth 2FA generator phone. So it's basically like their secure phone. And that's a really interesting use case, right? Like
have you guys thought about building like a first-party multi-sig product?
We haven't thought about building a first-party multi-sig product, but we have thought about what is a different way to think about a hardware wallet. Is maybe like hardware wallet means a very specific thing historically. I think there's opportunity to like really beat that up a little bit. And
There
I
is,
think
because there's no compute on a ledger. Like they're all like,
no.
warning, unknown trend. It's like, yeah, of
blind
course it's an unknown
signing.
transaction. This thing runs on a credit card smart chip. Like
Yeah,
there's
exactly. So I do actually think if we were to be serious about a yet another hardware device, and we really narrowed our aperture to like, if we ship hardware, it should only be for the most pro of our users. I actually think like, let's totally decompose what a hardware wallet is and how people use it, and just sort of rebuild that from first principles. I think there's something there. You know, as you know, like there's a lot of people in our industry who get paid in tokens, whether as an employee or as an advisor. There are people who receive, you know, pretty meaningful like stake and DeFi returns. So there's a lot of weird use cases of like, I receive these tokens and then they have to go somewhere, or I have to swap them and then they have to go somewhere.
yeah.
But like right now, I like bring together a bunch of hardware wallets and a multi-sig, and I like do it on a fresh computer, and there's just all this overhead. And I do think like that might be something that we could uniquely solve, because we understand the secure element piece. We understand really simple software. I don't know, that could be something that we tackle.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And then of course there is the luxury future dream of you make a validator that is just a beautiful piece of non-mobile hardware.
Yes, great. I will kick that off right now. We will get that. Yes, there's a whole bunch of like hardware off the wall ideas we have. The cool thing is like, we've seen a bunch of other experimentation across Solana and across crypto in the last few years. And like, I'm always excited to see people take really weird swings, or like really interesting and different swings. They might succeed, they might not. And so we have a lot we can learn from those crews. You know, Tolly's always been pretty gung-ho about it being a phone. And so far it's been a phone, but that doesn't mean it always has to be a phone.
Yeah. All right. Last question before I let you go. Is the Solana always going to be in Solana Mobile?
We have this conversation way too often. So, always, maybe not. For a while, definitely. I think the truth is, you know, and I don't need to preach to you, the things that matter for mobile, in terms of making devices and experiences really good, are uniquely well served by Solana as a network.
Yeah.
And so if we just like remove the sort of brand consideration and instead the chain alignment, it would make sense that everything we build is most useful on Solana, because Solana can service it the most effectively. So like, that will always be our primary consideration. Now, that doesn't mean we're against supporting additional asset types in the future. And I don't just mean by like bridging things back and forth. I do mean like, what might native support for additional assets look like in the future? Yeah. I don't have anything to announce there, but it's something we do think about, especially as we look to grow to new hardware manufacturers. If you're trying to onboard that set of users who maybe have a centralized exchange account or have a self-custody wallet, supporting some additional assets is critical. But with respect to branding, I think so long as we're a part of the Solana Labs family, we'll continue to carry that with pride. I think if a time comes that we're so successful that we've just built the mobile crypto platform and we're just on every Android handset manufacturer and we're supporting all these different asset types, we can take a step back and reconsider. But until then, I think it's important to focus ourselves, call our shot, and not, stretch ourselves too thin.
I think Solana Mobile is a much better name than Web3 Mobile.
Yeah, exactly. I will keep that. Maybe Web 4 or Web 5.0 mobile.
Web 5 mobile.
Yes.
Just for Jack Dorsey.
We will make one phone.
Excellent. Well, Emmett, if folks are interested in learning more about Solana Mobile, developing an app, buying a phone, where can they go to learn more?
SolanaMobile.com has everything. So definitely head there, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, the whole nine, all at Solana Mobile, all at the website. We still have phones to sell. So if you don't have a Seeker, I would encourage you to get one. Even if you're not ready to make the shift to this Android device as your primary device, if you're somebody who cares about holding digital assets and you care about crypto, it's worth trying to introduce new ways of thinking about trading on the go, having another device that's really dedicated for this purpose. So I'm happy to sell you another phone. And if you're a developer, like I said, we've got 800 apps. And while that's a lot more than we had not too long ago, it's still not so many that you can't compete really effectively for a super high value audience. So SolanaMobile.com is a really good jumping off point no matter who you are.
Excellent. Well, Emmett, thank you for joining us today on Validated.
Thanks for having me. Great seeing you.